Welcome to TBL Scope. I'm Kyle Koster. That's Brian Giuffra. We're coming to you on a Monday. News over the weekend came out. It's been anticipated, but it wasn't really official. Richard Deitch was the first to report that ESPN will be going forward with a new Monday Night Football booth when and if we get football back. This has been something that's been a long time in the making. Joe Tessitore and Booger McFarland have been seen as being on borrowed time for a long time. And I wrote, I think last week, that absent of any announcement from ESPN that this wasn't going to happen, these two were put in a really difficult situation where to be left to twist in the wind. Well, they have colleagues who were making no secret about their aspirations to be in that booth. So in one way, I'm happy to see that it's been addressed with them, but obviously it's got to be a huge disappointment. And I am in the minority, but I didn't think that their broadcast was all that bad. I think that Monday Night Football's biggest battle that it's been facing in recent years is just getting lackluster games and having no ability to flex out of them. But on the same hand, I understand why ESPN wants to make the move and go towards something a little bit different. What was your reaction to hearing the news?
Well, I mean, listen, to your point, I think Monday Night Football has that disadvantage of not being able to flex out of it, not being able to put some of those marquee games. So, I agree with you. It's good for them that they can kind of move forward. Tessitore, I believe, is going back to college football, and Booger's going to have a prominent studio role, according to Andrew Marchand. So I thought it was really an appropriate thing. ESPN has literally gone after Tony Romo, Al Michaels, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, like all of the biggest names this offseason. And meanwhile, those two were just kind of left there, as you said, twisting in the wind. So good for that to happen. The thing I was actually pretty surprised about was that Pat McAfee wasn't one of those names that was mentioned as a favorite. He's already with ESPN. He does Get Up. He does Thursday Night College Football for them. He's established himself as this really rising star who has a very loyal and large following, both on social and on his radio show, The Pat McAfee Show. And I really like him. I think he would be, to me, the perfect hire for what ESPN is trying to do. You mentioned it before. They don't necessarily always get those marquee games. This year, the schedule does look a little bit better, but sometimes you're just going to have those bad stinker games that you have to sit through. And I remember when John Gruden was on those, and you had the quarterback the quarterback segment that he did. I used to still watch those to watch John Gruden, and I think McAfee has that ability. Now, we haven't seen him in that prominent of an analyst role, so it is rolling the dice. But does ESPN really have anything to lose at this point? We know that they're punting at this point. They didn't hit on any of the big plays that they were trying to run during this offseason. So they're kind of punting on fourth down. And I'm not saying that just because McAfee was a punter in the NFL, but it gives them the opportunity to do like a 1-year try it, see what happens. And if it doesn't work out, okay, boom, you're going next year to try and find another marquee name, whether that be a Phillip Rivers or a Manning once again. So to me, some of the other candidates, I have a lot of respect for Dan Orlovsky, Louis Riddick and Brian Griese, but at the same time, like none of them are going to create any buzz. And if Monday Night Football is trying to compete, even now with Thursday Night Football, which used to be seen as kind of the laughingstock, and now all of a sudden is getting these like amazing games, kicking off with Chiefs Texans this year. I mean, you need some sort of firepower. And I think, as I said, in a year where they're kind of punting anyway, why not give McAfee this shot?
Yeah, I think that you're not alone in that reaction. Just to cover a few bases. The leader in the clubhouse is considered to be play-by-play is Steve Levy. And I think it's interesting that I think he came a lot closer than people really appreciate a few years ago when they were making a similar decision about what to do. So I think that seems pretty solid to me that they're going to go there. And then any combination of Dan Orlovsky, Louis Riddick, and or Brian Griese. If I had to pick right now what I think they're going to do, they're probably going to take Orlovsky because the ability to have a quarterback who can break down what a quarterback sees is so important in today's booth. That's really where it's focused. You look at Romo, you look elsewhere. You look at like that why NBC wants Drew Brees, and Orlovsky's really good at it. He's really good in the studio shows, and even before that, when he just making his name on Twitter doing it, he's very good at performing that one element. And I think that they'll go with Riddick over Brian Griese because you want the player personnel perspective as well. And I also think that Brian Griese is just not as an attractive of an offer. Nothing against him. I just think that I would rather see Riddick in there if I was ESPN. I kind of disagree with you on McAfee because I think it'd be really awesome to have him be involved in the broadcast. And the easiest way to put him in there, you would think, would be on the sidelines, right? Well, he just minutes ago, he was addressed it on his show, and he said he doesn't really like being a sideline guy because he doesn't ask it like asking for permission to talk, which is very relatable and very understanding. And the part of his energy that's so good is he's quick on his feet, and his one-liners are there. And if he's got to run through, hey, patch into the truck, I want to say something, that you really lose a lot of that spontaneity. So I don't think that there's value in putting him like down on the field or even going to him and like just for special teams or whatever they wanted to do with him. I think if you put together the booth of Levy, who's kind of, I mean, he was very good NHL. He's been really good on college football radio before he was doing TV games in recent years. I think that people don't appreciate how good he's going to be at that role. I think that he's got that nice mix of gravitas, which I think that Tessitore leaned into a little more, the Frank Sinatra element of it. I think that Levy takes himself a little less seriously and can have fun there. Orlovsky, like I said, you have such a bright future if you bring in Orlovsky and you bring in what's his name? Louis Riddick. Yes, I'm sorry, Mike there. I was thinking Chronicles of Riddick, and then JJ Redick got in the brain. That's just how I'm operating these days. But anyway, you put that booth together, I think that you have the ability to have it intact for several years going forward. So that's why I push against the McAfee thing, because like you said, it is high risk, because if it doesn't work, then you've had even more turnover in the booth. And I think you're probably going to go for a safer one. Even McAfee himself said it's probably going to need to be new leadership atop ESPN in maybe 10 years down the road.
Yeah, he did tweet that, but I've got to push back against you. So I don't think ESPN wants to keep this booth together no matter what, right? Maybe one of them or two of them stays on. But if you're talking about a 3-person booth and that's your 3-person booth, ESPN wants star power, right? And ultimately, we know that their ultimate goal is to get the Super Bowl on ABC. I don't see Louis Riddick, Orlovsky and Levy, having that kind of, as you said, gravitas to lure the NFL to saying, yeah, we'll give you the Super Bowl once every 5 years. So I would say that you need somebody like him. And if ESPN is going to change up next year anyway, then why not try? I think also just when you think about like from an audience standpoint, McAfee's audience is different than the audience that watches ESPN. It's more of like that bar stool, like the bro element. And I know that a lot of them obviously watch ESPN still, but it's kind of like it's almost like the Portnoy thing, right? Where you're going to get like a different, more ravenous fan base that's going to kind of come to your aid when he calls them to action. And I think, even in his tweet, he said, he would try everything to make sure that they had a very strong user base. And I think that, to me, is probably what ESPN needs more now than ever, because they've had so much turnover the last couple of years. I agree with you that long term they need to get some continuity there, right? And they haven't had that since Gruden left. So I feel like they should try this year to do something a little bit different. I would like that. I think what you said in terms of having the quarterback, the personnel guy, and then kind of the person who ties it all together, that makes sense in theory. But again, I don't know if those names are going to like jump out at you, especially when you're competing with the Al Michaels, Chris Collinsworth, Troy Aikman, Joe Bucks, and obviously the Nance and Tony Romo combinations of the world. It just, as a number one booth, it just doesn't match up with those. And I'm not saying that McAfee matches up with them either, but I'm saying that he gives you that like interest that like so many more people, the first time he would be on Monday Night Football, so many more people would tune in just to be like, What is Pat McAfee going to say? What is he going to do? How are they going to actually use him? I think it's worth taking that risk.
Agree. I think that there's a lot of things to consider, and you consider it from the NFL perspective as well. Like you said, I mean, the number one goal is to get a Super Bowl on ABC, right? So maybe if you put a booth intact that is a little more NFL and Shield friendly. Not saying that McAfee's not. I mean, he has gotten the sign off to do games on Fox before. I mean, it's I'm not insinuating in any way that the NFL would have a problem with them, but he is a bit more of a wild card, right? Than we'll say Dan Orlovsky, Louis Riddick, Steve Levy. So I think that's a really important consideration for them to do. And I also think that you don't want to alienate any of your existing customers, because I don't know if this is the great debate, right? Is there really more upside to bringing in someone, a new fan, or do you want to retain the people whose viewing habits are like, I watch Monday Night Football no matter what, and I don't care who the announcers are? And I don't know what the answers are. What the correct answer is there. I think time will tell. And I think that you made a good point too. Something else we covered on the site: the slate of games this year for Monday Night Football, at least on paper, which is all we have right now, certainly looks better. Did you agree? You agree with that? I mean, obviously you said it before, but some of the things that I pointed to was getting Tom Brady on there twice, and then really addressing what's been the real troublemaker in recent years is injuries have made their December games so much less attractive, and this year they've at least taken some steps to to guard against that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, the big issue that Monday Night Football has always faced was that you kind of have a little bit of fatigue. It's not like the old days where you got one game on a Sunday, right? Now you're getting a game on a Thursday. You're getting multiple games on Sunday afternoon. You're getting a marquee game Sunday going into your night, and then you're getting a Sunday night game. And because Sunday dominates football so much, Monday almost becomes like a fatigue element. And I think I'm just talking about from the users, it's hard to watch. And then it's even harder when, as you said, right, maybe the matchup that was created in May doesn't hold up in December, which is usually the case, right? It's hard to predict what teams are going to be good. You mentioned, Tom Brady. Obviously, having him on 5 primetime games, the NFL is doing that for a reason, but also, the Cowboys are on there. So they're really leaning into those big quarterback matchups on Monday night, which I think is really important, and those big fan bases, which I think is important. And I think that this was kind of a sign as the NFL is going to re-up its TV rights deals in the next year. This is a sign that they probably want to give ESPN a little bit more. They did the NFL draft with ESPN this year. It went off, I would say, about as well as anybody could have ever hoped for. So ESPN, ABC, Disney as a whole is really kind of showing its, deep interest in the NFL and trying to expand that partnership. So I thought that this almost might have been a nod from the NFL, like, okay, we're going to really try this year to give you some good games. Although the Giants opening the season at the Steelers is not going to be a good one, so the first game is not a good one. But yeah, there's some good ones out there, and I think it'll be really interesting and great storylines for ESPN.
I just don't think, like, stepping back and looking at this over the last several years, I just don't think that it's been fair the entire way in which Monday Night Football has been dissected from every angle. I think that it's one of those things where people, for whatever reason, feel blood in the water, and they feel like they wanted to jump on this. And if a certain segment of people decide and want to put something out there that something is bad or it's not working, I think it's super easy to get people to jump on the bandwagon because everybody wants to punch someone when they're down or when they're perceived to be down. I haven't really enjoyed either of the last 2 boosts that have called Monday Night Football, but I also never got to a point where I ever considered I'm not going to watch football because I don't enjoy the way that they're presenting it. I watch it because the games are on. And I just think it's been pretty wild that we've seen all this pile on and all this discussion, even leading into like what's next for this network, even though people were still going forward. I got to imagine with the plan that they'd be calling football games again this season. So what's your reaction to that? Do you think that it's been fair?
No, I think it's been very fair. I think because it distracts you. It distracts you from the game. You know, the Booger Mobile and Jason Witten's constant mistakes and just the way that Booger kind of broke down the game. It was, he just kind of repeated himself a lot. So I thought it was a distraction from the games. And listen, if you're watching it on mute, which sometimes I do watch some sporting events on mute because I just can't stand the announcers, then okay, it's you're just watching it for the pure love of the game. But like when you watch a game that Tony Romo is calling, and I know that people think I love Tony Romo so much, but he adds something to the game, and that's what an announcer is supposed to do. You're supposed to be the person who's adding something to the game. Troy Aikman has done that for a long time. You almost like forget how good he is. Like he's become like the forgotten one somehow, even though in my opinion, he's probably still either just a little bit better than Tony Romo or about the same level. Those people add something to the game. They add something to the pregame coverage. They add something to the in-game coverage, and they add something to the post-game coverage. And I just never got that feeling from Witten or Booger. I never thought Tessitore did a bad job. And again, I don't think they did a bad job. I just think they weren't really set up for success. And the Booger Mobile, I mean, that was all anybody talked about for basically the entirety of that Monday night season. Not only the people watching at home, but the fans like taking photos and posting on Twitter like, this is my view. Thanks, Booger. And these people are paying like hundreds of dollars for these like really low things, and he's in the way. So my whole thing would be, don't be a distraction. It's like when you're playing golf and you're playing golf with a guy who's not a good golfer. Don't hold me up. I don't care that you're not a good golfer. Just don't hold me up. And I think that's the feeling I got from Witten and Booger.
Yeah. The last note here. Who do you are you having going with the same three that I am? End up getting the job.
I mean, yeah, that makes the most sense. If they're going internal, those are the safe calls. Those are also, I mean, in my opinion, like really good calls. They're solid. They're not going to blow me away. So yeah, if I had to go, and again, when Andrew Marchand reports that, I'm going to agree with him and believe his reporting. So yeah, it seems like those are the right call. I agree. Brian Griese, he's not going to do it. At least Orlovsky has built this following on Get Up. And he's really kind of also created his own following in terms of his analysis, which is extremely strong.
Yeah. And lastly, let me just get this on the record. Pat McAfee, if you're watching, I'm on to you because I know that you appreciate selling stuff like pro wrestling. And I am not 100% convinced that this is all not just to throw people off the scent. So I would not be shocked. I would not be shocked if he ends up doing it. And this is all a clever ruse because that guy's very clever and he knows what to do. That's been TBL Scope. Brian Giuffra, Kyle Koster. We'll see you next time.